right, man. So we got some pretty huge news for Kamala Harris in the state of Arizona. This might have actually won her the election in the state of Arizona. Now, Kamala Harris is reaching out to a lot of different groups, a lot of groups that you probably never thought of, or different strategies that a lot of people wouldn't be super into. For example, she's really making a large thrust of her campaign, actually going out and getting votes in rural communities in states like Georgia, for example. I think at least in the state of Georgia or something like that, like almost 40% of the rural areas are actually black or minorities and those kinds of groups as well. So the idea with those kinds of strategies is not that, hey, I want to flip rural areas to actually vote in favor of me, but let me chip away by a couple points. That's all you need to do. Like, if you can eat into the uneducated vote by like 2-3 points, you basically win the election pretty much. A lot of people think that when you're targeting a group, it's like it's either you win it or you lose it. Like, no, losing by, let's say, 40 to 60 as opposed to 70 to 30 is a huge world of a difference. But even 2 or 3 points can make the difference. Like, if Kamala Harris can get 2 more points amongst male voters, that could legitimately win her the election because she's clearly very, very strong amongst women voters. Now, this might be a group that you had no idea, never thought of. I'm not going to lie, I never even heard about this being an outreach group, but we do have this big story. It says new Kamala Harris is stepping up outreach to Mormon voters. AP first reports that today her Arizona campaign will launch a Latter-day Saints for Harris Walls Advisory Committee. There are 450,000 Latter-day Saints voters in AZ that could reject Trump over morals. So we talked about the Haitian vote as well. They have about 500,000 people in Florida, but probably 250 to 300,000 of those are actually voting age people. Now, with a group like that, you want to focus on turnout, right? Because Haitians are probably already voting Democrat. However, as we saw with the bar that we looked at on the Cook Political website yesterday in our North Carolina analysis, if you were to just turn up the turnout bar from 66 up to 72, the margin of the black vote is so massive, 92 to 7 or something. If you just turn up turnout, you're going to make it a larger proportion of the vote, and a 92 to 7 split is going to go in your favor. So you didn't need to convince any black people who are voting conservative. You didn't need to convince any of those 7%. All you had to do was get more black people to turn out. That's not going to be the strategy with this group, though. There's likely what's going to happen is you're probably going to try to convince voters to flip. So this article says, Kamala Harris steps up outreach to Mormon voters in battleground Arizona. Vice President Kamala Harris is stepping up her efforts to win over voters who belong to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, enlisting prominent members of the faith to make the case in pivotal Arizona that Donald Trump does not align with the church's values. Her state campaign announced on Thursday an advisory committee to formalize the outreach to current and former members of the church, widely known as the Mormon Church. With nearly 450,000 church members in Arizona, about 6% of the state's population. That's a pretty large percent of the population. I think 2.4% of Florida's population was Haitian, so almost like a 3 times multiplier here. Latter-day Saints and former church members could prove critical in what will likely be an extremely close race. That's an understatement of the century. We could see here, back in 2020, Joe Biden actually wins by 0.3%. He ends up winning by like less than 11,000 votes, it looks like. So it's going to be razor thin. So even the smallest of a margin amongst these voters could be absolutely crucial, absolutely crucial. It says Latter-day Saints have traditionally voted Republican and are likely to remain part of the GOP coalition. Clustered in solidly Republican states, they have long been a major force in GOP primaries and local politics across the West, but they have not held much sway in national elections. In 2020, about 7 in 10 Mormon voters nationally supported Trump, according to AP VoteCast, while about 1/4 backed Democrat Joe Biden. So that's also kind of interesting there as well, because that means that there's only 9.5 out of 10 that were voting for Biden or Trump. So are they sitting out? Are they voting for someone else? Can that, 0.5 out of 10, can you convince them to vote for you? The margin was less than 11,000 votes. Even the smallest amount, like 60K people, Haitians in Georgia, if there's like half of those are 30,000 or something are, voters, that could make the difference in a state like Georgia. Georgia was won by like some measly like 12,000 votes basically. So in an area like that, that could be huge. Core to Harris's strategy is preventing Trump from running up big margins with demographic groups that favor him. That does appear to be a general ethos strategy for Kamala Harris's campaign. Well, she's unlikely to win anything close to a majority of Latter-day Saints. That's not the goal, by the way. That is not the goal. Please, that is not the goal. Pick up a small share of their vote to make a big difference in a state with the recent history of tight elections. That is correct. Biden won by just under 10,500 votes in 2020. Democratic Attorney General Chris Mays won by just 280 in 2022, which is insane. Latter-day Saints supporting Harris in Arizona make a faith-based appeal for backing the Democratic ticket despite any reservations, pointing to church teaching that the U.S. Constitution is divinely inspired. The Constitution is a tenet of our faith, and we certainly shouldn't be voting for people who have shown a disdain for it, said Joel John. Wow, that is the whitest name of all time. Joel John, are you kidding me? A former Republican state lawmaker who will serve as a co-chair of the committee, and we certainly shouldn't be supporting someone who tried to overthrow it on January 6th. So I think 2024 Trump is actually a lot different in terms of being actual potential for moderate Republicans. I think they did play a small role in 2020. I think 2016 they were virtually non-existent. But since 2020, I feel like Mary Trump really started that wave. I remember when that happened, when I saw her come out, I was like, whoa, like the tide is turning with the so-called moderate Republican. Now you have like Pat Toomey, you have A.G. Gonzalez, you have like Dick and Liz Cheney. There's so many people coming out now. Mitt Romney says he's not voting for Trump, but he hasn't endorsed Harris yet. I don't know if he will. But the point being, I think there actually is going to be some small movement. Is it going to be massive? No, it's not going to be massive. But again, you only need a very small movement to win. Another reason why I think a state like Georgia, for example, is going to be really a lock to win because so much of the population is black, like over 30%. And then also, presumably, there's going to be some kind of moderate Republican vote as well. John said that explains how his faith guides his own support for Harris, but emphasized he's not speaking on behalf of the church and doesn't judge Latter-day Saints who vote differently. That might be the right strategy from your perspective if you're actually trying to convince people. That's actually why I think a lot of the voter shaming of the third party, even though I think the votes aren't smart, they're not good votes, it's like if you go about it that way and antagonizing, it's probably not going to convince anybody. The Salt Lake City-based church does not endorse candidates or political parties, but John said Latter-day Saints are encouraged to elect politicians who are, quote, good, honest, and wise. He said those are moral traits that Trump lacks and that transcend any policy difference he might have with Harris, such as her economic plans or position on gun rights. And she's also moved like much more right on gun rights. She just said with Oprah, like if someone comes to my house, I'm shooting them, you know? So things are kind of flipping in real time. Haley Dobbins, a spokesperson for the RNC, said Democrats have, quote, allowed progressive policies to erode traditional values. President Trump has consistently stood with believers by protecting religious institutions, appointing constitutionalist judges, and defending Christian values nationally and abroad, Dobbins said in a statement. He has made it a priority to protect religious communities, not fight against them. So you can see here, this is the defense mechanism from the RNC, so probably not a very strong kind of appeal to them. While many conservative-leaning religious voters warmed to him long ago, Trump has struggled to win over Latter-day Saints. For many members of the church, Trump's penchant for foul language and demeaning rhetoric toward women and people of color clashes with the church's value of humility, morality, and compassion. I think the Latter-day Saints church was especially racist, I think, right? I don't remember how long it took them to allow black people to be the heads of church or whatever. It has not helped that Trump is feuded with U.S. Senator Mitt Romney, our Utah, among the best-known members of the church, and former U.S. Senator Jeff Flake. Oh, I remember him. Our Arizona. That's a throwback. In Arizona, Latter-day Saints make up an outsized share of the population in Metro Phoenix's East Valley, a suburban area where ticket-splitting voters have rejected Trump-backed Republicans, helping to push a reliable GOP state into a battleground. Mesa, Arizona's third-largest city with more than 500,000 people, traces its modern history to a settlement founded by pioneers from the faith in the 1800s. It's also funny that the name of the city is Mesa. It's oh yeah, Table. Our city's name is Table. It's kind of funny. Church members also settled in swaths of rural Arizona. Their descendants remain deeply rooted there. Democratic efforts to woo Latter-day Saints are not new. Hillary Clinton in 2016 drew parallels between Trump's pledge to stop Muslim immigration and the history of religious persecution against Latter-day Saints. Biden went further 4 years later, investing in organizing church members as Harris is trying to do now. So it wasn't as strong in 2016, but it wasn't bad. And this is actually an article older, but it says here, President Joe Biden won Arizona in 2020 by some 10,000 votes. His gains among Latter-day Saints in Arizona may have amounted to about 18,000 votes. So we can see is it's getting progressively stronger, this sort of Republican moderate or whatever you want to call it, right? It does seem to actually be manifesting itself now. So I think even if it was done in 2016, even 2020, I think it's likely to be much stronger this time around because Trump is so much more viewed as a TFG. January 6th happened. He's still denying the election results. He's going even hard. I didn't think this was possible, but he's actually going even harder racist somehow. So I think this is going to be more powerful potentially here. I think it's a good strategy for sure on their grounds, and I think it'll be more effective this time around. But we can check this out. So if we check out the polls right now in Arizona, we can see this on 538. We can see it's a plus 0.5 lead for Trump, a very, very small margin. It was even on the 18th. On the 19th, it goes up to 0.5 and then it's stuck. If we take a look at recent polls, some of the polling is all over the place. You have Emerson College rounded up to one lead, so it's 50-49, a very good showing for Kamala Harris. Morning Consult 48-47 in favor of her. Trafalgar 46-47, that's Trump +2. Data Orbital is even. Redfield is a really bad pollster. They have Trump +1. Morning Consult +2. Tip Insights, this is a sponsor by a conservative outlet. Patriot Polling is one of the horrible 2022 pollsters, as is Insider Advantage. So we're actually getting murked by a bunch of these bad polls that are coming out. But what's interesting about Arizona that might even be different than the Rust Belt states, if you take a look at this, because a lot of the right-wing polls, I think, from the Rust Belt states ended up being more accurate than the other polls were, but that's not the case in these states. You can see, Trafalgar's polls here in October, early October, was Trump +4, and then Trump +3. They missed, you can see here, they missed 3%, 3 or more percent of Biden's vote share in the latest poll, and then in the poll prior to that in early October, they missed 5% of it. And so what actually ended up happening was Biden actually overperformed his poll numbers. So in Arizona, you can see he's actually polling at about 48.7. He ends up getting 49.4. That's a very large overperformance of 0.7 points that actually wins him the election because he only won by 0.3. If he had no overperformance or a slight underperformance, let's say he underperformed by 0.2, he actually loses the election because they missed Trump's numbers by literally 3%, which is massive. So I'm actually bigger on the Sun Belt than I am the Rust Belt for these reasons. In the Rust Belt, some of those right-wing polls were actually more accurate. In these ones, they were actually a lot worse. They were even worse than the aggregate. So the aggregate, for example, is off by 2.6. The Trafalgar poll was off by 3 and 4, right? In October, 3 and 4 is even larger than the aggregate was, right? So you could see a lot of these like right-wing pollsters, and then we could see like maybe Insider Advantage. They're not here, I guess. See Patriot Polling. Okay, so it looks like they weren't here either. But you got like some of these were here, some of these weren't, right? You got this Trafalgar poll that's like +3. Maybe that was like a Georgia poll where we had those in. But you can see the Trafalgar polls were really, really off. So that makes me really, really excited because I think that there's going to be a really massive overperformance for Kamala Harris where the polls are going to miss a lot of her support. They're going to end up missing a lot of her support because we could see a lot of these polls will be like 46, 47, 48. I can guarantee she's going to overperform that. In addition to that, I also believe that there's actually going to be, I think there's a pretty hard ceiling for Trump in the Sun Belt states. I'd be shocked if he could reach 50%. I don't think he can reach 50 because he wasn't even able to reach 50 in 2020, where I think he was stronger based on favorability. I think he's probably a stronger candidate. Additionally to that, there's going to be third-party candidates as opposed to a one-on-one. So if he can't even hit 50 here, I highly doubt he can do it now. So he probably has a hard ceiling of, I would say, 49.5. So if I'm Kamala Harris, I would just focus on really just sort of stimming your vote and going up and up and up because he can't really get that high. But there's going to be so many voters that are missed, just like Biden's were. You're going to have, young Latino women, young black women, etc. The Hispanics in the state are actually more progressive typically than other states. I believe it's a little bit spurious because I think they just skew younger. So when you control for age, it's ends up being a spurious relationship. But, Carrie Lake is on the ballot, so she's really disliked. So there might be an anti-Carrie Lake vote. People do seem to like Gallegos, so there might be like a pro-Gallego vote. Abortion is also on the ballot. Cornel West is off the ballot. Trash-ass Jill Stein is on the ballot, which sucks. But, hopefully you'll still be able to win because RFK is not on the ballot. And I don't think Oliver is really going to take away votes from Trump. I think he's probably just going to get votes that weren't going to go to Trump anyways. But great news for Kamala Harris in Arizona. I think that even if she's down like 1 point on election day or half a point in the polls in Arizona, I think she still probably wins just based on the fundamentals and kind of what's going on. Obama actually was only up 0.7 nationally in 2012. He ends up winning by almost 4 points. So his margin, he overperformed by like 3. He overperforms by like 2.3, and then Romney underperforms by like 1. So I think we're going to see something similar to that as well, because so much of Kamala Harris's strength is with all these different groups that are going to get missed by the polls. We know that new registrations are spiking through the roof. So I'm at the point now where, we have to kind of correct for the polls and see where they're going wrong, et cetera, et cetera. What could they possibly be missing? So I think that this is really great news for Kamala Harris in Arizona. I would say Georgia is a lock to go blue. NC is a fucking dogfight. That could go either way. It's actually going to be, I think, tough for it to go blue. I think it's possible. And then Arizona, I would say, is a likely blue. Not a lock, but likely blue, I would say. Georgia, I say like that because so much of the population is black. It's like 30+% of the population proportion is black. And I think she's just going to do really, really strong, especially with black women voters, I feel like. So there's probably going to be like a moderate Republican vote out there too. And it obviously already went blue last time. Warnock was bluer that time than Biden was in 2020. So they are using some of those same Warnock strategies as well. It looks like areas like Macon and Augusta and those areas are turning bluer. Even Metro Atlanta looked bluer, and there's still Atlanta growth happening. So there's still more black people moving into those areas. Those people are going to heavily vote Democratic. So I would say Georgia's a lock, Arizona's likely blue, and then NC is a fucking dogfight, son. It is a dogfight.